Aloha, nerds, and welcome back to another episode of the Salawag's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. And I just saw Black Widow, the latest installment, the latest delayed installment from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, taking place after the events of Captain America Civil War, where the Avengers stopped being buddies and kind of separated for a little while, and prior to the events of Avengers Infinity War, where all the Avengers slowly come together to fight Thanos. So, in this period, Black Widow is on the run from the government because she has betrayed her team and has joined the Captain America side in the fight for justice. But little does she know, her past is coming back to haunt her. So essentially, Black Widow's fellow Black Widows re-enter her life as they are being hunted by other characters from her past. So this movie is a cool little introduction. With Black Widow, we never see her origin except for in Avengers Age of Ultron, the second Avengers movie way back when. We don't really get her origin. We're introduced to her in Iron Man 2. We get some great action with the Avengers films, but her character has never really had a lot of time spent. So what's great about this movie is that this movie gives you a good taste of her origin. Certainly it would have been cool to have more of that, to have this movie be more about that. But it gives you a little hint of her origin, which is the opening sequence, which I don't want to spoil too much, but is the introduction of both the sort of spy elements of this movie, but also the family unit that will come up later in the movie. Black Widow and her family, her little spy family, really awesome introduction to this movie. What I really like about the beginning of this movie is that you don't have to know anything about the Marvel Cinematic Universe going into just the introduction. You're just introduced to Black Widow as a kid, and you see the circumstances that she's in, and you see already at a young age that she has the aptitudes that she later has as an adult, but there's a reason for it. It's not just some kind of weird Mary Sue, like, oh, you're just good at things because. What I really like, and I'm just geeking out about the beginning of this movie right now, because these movies are so popcorn, what I really love about the beginning of this movie is it feels like a real movie. It feels like, what I mean is, some of these MCU movies feel like a TV show as a movie. You know what I mean? Or like the TV show version of a movie. Like Thor: The Dark World very much felt like an episodic piece of television. No offense to the filmmakers, I know they worked hard, but it's just it didn't quite feel like a movie. But what's great about this when it begins, and I feel like I'm in a legitimate spy thriller opening sequence, and in the best kind of unexpected way possible. And it brings us all the way to a main title sequence, which is all showing us how Scarlett Johansson's Black Widow and Florence Pugh's Black Widow, Florence Pugh from Midsommar and Fighting with My Family and other stuff. We see how these characters are tied up front, and their combination and their struggles come out later in the movie, but it all starts in the beginning of this movie. It's really cool to see the filmmaker take their time, establish the family circumstance that they're in, establish sort of some of the little character qualities that these guys have. There's a little whistle that Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh as children have between each other, and it's just a little vocal musical signature between the two of them. That's their own little source of communication. And it's just a detail. It's not that important toward the rest of the movie, but it's a nice little thing that they lay in there. And how cool it's like the movie starts off feeling like this authentic, independent film about a little family, but ramps up into this really cool thriller where you're not sure where it's going to go and what's going on. And without spoiling too much, then there's a great action scene, and But again, in a way that feels authentic and feels like some kind of legitimate, spy thriller type of film. And going into the title sequence where we see Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh as children being pulled into the life of the Black Widow. That title sequence is great. What a great way to bring back the title sequence as well. Not many of the Marvel movies do it. It's nice to see a title sequence that tells a piece of the story as well. So you're kind of, what's cool is the movie works kind of both ways. Where if you have seen the MCU for the last 10 years, you already know everything, and you kind of just, oh, okay, well, this is how it goes on. But if you haven't seen it, you can kind of just be engaged in a fun, entertaining spy film with like this cool little backstory subtext that just makes everything else happen. At some point I'll get really geeky on this. This is really just opening night. I just had a lot of great feelings about it. So again, I'm so excited about this movie that the opening, sequence and title sequence was worth the price of admission for me, just because I was so glad to see Marvel do something I've been wanting more of, which is, take us back to making a real movie again. I think the Avengers movies have been great. Definitely, I love the last two, but even those kind of have such a Hollywoody feel. I just loved having, when you get to have a blockbuster have genuine sense of cinema, even if it's still action, but it's kind of a different feeling of a genre, like the spy thriller. I really would have loved if the rest of the movie was more like the beginning of this movie. But there's nothing. I feel nothing necessarily wrong with where they went. This is the Marvel brand, and they're just sticking to it. And like, okay, this is what you want to do for now, But down the line, more of that, more of that. Imagine how many movies you could make if you really don't think of it as stretching it out. I would say I would just think, tell the story completely. I would love to see a Black Widow 2 that expands upon the opening of this movie. But then following the opening, which gives us a taste of Black Widow's origin from child to adult, once we get to adult Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow, then we start to begin the more classic spy movies, assassin spy film stuff. Scarlett Johansson outsmarting people and all the incredible action. Florence Pugh being introduced with an awesome action sequence. It's cool how the way this movie rolls out. There's a scene early in the movie where Scarlett Johansson is watching the movie Moonraker, which is one of my personal favorite James Bond films. It's basically James Bond versus Space Hitler. A new type of Hitler has arisen, who's built himself a space station in the middle of, orbiting between the Earth and the Moon, and he wants to create the next master race and protect them on the space station. So it starts off with a scene between those characters, and it includes Jaws, the incredible Jaws. I believe that's David Keel. I hope I got that name right. But that Bond, David Keel, Jaws, and Drax, Space Hitler. It's a scene between the three of them, and essentially this movie has that kind of relationship. Jaws was this big, tall guy who seemed indomitable and had these these silver, shiny teeth. Taskmaster is our muscle villain in this movie, and even though he doesn't look he doesn't look anything like Jaws, there's that sense of here's the real muscle, and because it's a James Bond movie being presented to us, it's introducing the notion for those who already know James Bond films. James Bond films pretty much get to the action, and the action and laughs really don't stop until the end of the movie. And especially that era of James Bond, where the Bond movies were really raking in cash. You'd have action scene on top of action scene on top of action scene of Bond basically escaping the same exact type of villain or attack narrowly, and it's always spectacular, and how did you really survive that? And basically, that is what Black Widow is. It is, if you like those James Bond movies, and especially of that era, and they make references to Moonraker later on in the movie. I'll talk about that in my more spoiler section. But I just thought, wow, it's cool to see. Not only do we get this great cinematic beginning of the movie that feels like a movie, but now, once the movie actually starts, we're just back to classic James Bond stuff, but with Black Widow. It's a Black Widow story, so it's a different kind of hero. But more in line with what James Bond was. That I think that's what's cool about the way the movie unfolds. And of course, there's a master villain and a master plot, and the movie comes to a great MCU Hollywood ending. But they don't destroy anything that you do know. Well, they twist it a little bit, but they don't destroy anything that you do know about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And although my sister and my nerd brother did feel like they would have felt more for Scarlett Johansson's death in Endgame if this movie came first, I do agree with it at a certain point. But when I spoil this a little bit more, I feel that now it's just entertainment. You know what I mean? It's just entertainment at this point. This is just more stuff. I think ultimately the most disappointing thing is that this movie is really an origin for why Scarlett Johansson wears beep. I'll talk about that in the spoiler section. So yeah. So okay, just on the whole, did I have a good time? 100%. Should you watch it? Yes. If you like action movies, if you enjoy the Marvel movies and you like action movies, it's totally for the normies. But it's also for if you love Mission Impossible, if you love James Bond, the old school James Bond, pre Daniel Craig, and we're talking still Pierce Brosnan, like anything between Moore and Brosnan, you're getting a movie for you. This is totally for you. And what's amazing is that, and if you like beautiful women firing weapons and kicking ass for about 2 hours straight, this movie's for you. You know what I mean? It doesn't over sexualize them like most movies do, but you still get to see just just good old fashioned action that the man, what can I even say now? That people, they enjoy. Yeah, kick-ass movie, great time. You're gonna enjoy it. And I say personally, don't worry about the fact that it takes place before Endgame, even though Endgame already happened. Forget about that. It's not. This is the MCU. At this point, they just know we're coming to see their movies, so don't worry about it. Just enjoy the action. Really good time. This is a popcorn movie, and justifies all your action figure purchases. Every scene with the costume changes, totally worth seeing. Why is she in white? I can't even spoil it. There's nothing to spoil. It just randomly shows up in the movie with that outfit. So, but toy purchase justified because she wears it in the movie. So it's not just a stupid variant. Yeah, that's how I'll judge these movies. Toy purchase necessary. No, go check it out. That's the end of my spoiler-free stuff. I'm going to be nerding out next.
Aloha, nerds! Check out the new toys from Marvel Legends' Black Widow movie toy line. ScarJo's head has never looked more real. Florence Pugh looks almost exactly like she does on screen, and that does not look like Red Guardian. Olga Kurylenko, though, has never looked hotter. That's right, all the babes are in this Marvel Legends toy line. Go get it now on eBay because this was discontinued 2 years ago.
Okay, are all the people who haven't watched the movie gone? Nope. So here's this. I'm talking about some spoilers in this movie. I'm talking. This is the spoiler free. This is the spoiler full section, and I may geek out. This is going to be a little less geeky than Unbreakable, because I really have not much to go off of. But the frickin' old school action movie love that this movie does, I appreciate so much. I know it's not a perfect movie. I would love that beginning. Okay, let me just talk about that beginning. Have you seen the movie yet? Because I'm spoiling this shit from fucking scene one. Don't don't you dare go see it first. I'm not worth your time. Go watch Black Widow first. Uh, right from the beginning, that we get this introduction of Black Widow as a kid, and is that Mia Jovovich's daughter? I neglected to check, but is that Mia Jovovich's daughter? I follow Mia Jovovich, Lilu Dallas Multipass on Instagram, and I swear that actress looked familiar, but I don't know. Anyway, so we're seeing Black Widow as a kid, Florence Pugh's character as a kid, and you know what? I'm sorry, but she's Florence Pugh for me. I don't care what her character's name is. After Midsommar and fighting with my family, this is this is the conclusion to my introduction to Florence Pugh and what a great actress she is. Because wow, she's great, and Kid Her is great too. It's cool to have this little misleading family segment that is the beginning of this movie, where we see a family that looks normal. It's totally like The Americans, which I never bothered watching, with Carrie Russell, where you got the Russian family. Basically, they're a fake family. They're a spy family, and David Harbour is the father. Red Guardian is the American father, and they all have their perfect American accents and all that stuff. And then it hits a point where, and Rachel Weisz plays the mother, and it's very interesting. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Rachel Weisz from 1995 appears in this movie. It's really, yeah, it's nuts to have all that happening and have them have this kind of True Lies moment of speaking behind the wall while the kids are in the dining room and having their private spy conversation. And then even as kids, the whistling is kind of, it feels kind of like a military spy type of communication, even though they're kids, and especially because she becomes Black Widow later. All those kind of associations are there, and it's fun, it's nice, but it's really cool to just see this very basic, simple build up of a family. It's just back to the basics, just telling a film story about a family that's not really a family. It's a false family. And that's very much the debate of this movie, is this a real family or not? So to present a sort of personal conflict for Black Widow, because she's not a character who talks about herself, that's just not how she is. She'll sort of unveil just a little bit about herself to certain people at certain times, but she's not the kind of person who's going to run around having speeches about everything that happened to her. And especially with where this beginning goes, where we get that epic build up to them escaping on the plane and Shield is chasing them. I'm like, to me, this is more rewarding for just what you already know, where it's like, okay, cool. It's cool to see that Shield was involved in these kind of early missions this whole time. And it's like we're in the spy hunt. We're in the thing that shows up in the newspaper, but you don't really understand what's going on, and it just, whoa, that was a spy thing. Like, what happened to this airstrip? It was cool seeing, the family, Rachel Weisz and the girls get inside this plane on a little abandoned airstrip, and then all of a sudden David Harbour just flips a vehicle that's in front of it over so that the airplane can get out. And then he rides the wing of the plane while firing at the Shield agents. And I've never been so conflicted. I'm like, I know those are the good guys, but I really want to see these guys get out of here because this is exciting and cool. And you've done all the work of making me connect with these characters because I know who they are. I know what their relationships are to each other. And with what we'll see next, I understand how complicated this will feel for each one of them emotionally. So a lot is being packed into this introduction of the movie. I don't feel like it was perfectly handled later, but I'd say mildly clumsy, but not so clumsy that I'm like bothered by it. I felt like, the challenge is how do you have characters confront these issues who aren't the type of people who are going to talk about their problems. And I think the movie, dances that line well enough when, again, we haven't gotten to the title sequence yet, but when we get to the family getting out and getting away from Shield, and they go to Cuba, which we know has ties with Russia. Well, this is more deeper historical, but we know those ties are there. And so it's crazy when we get to the Cuban airport and the Russian military takes them. I think it's the Russian military. I don't know. I'm not paying that much attention. I haven't, there's no DVD to watch special features. I don't know anything. But to see this evil boss guy, who is essentially the antagonist of this movie, Dreykov. To see Dreykov basically tell David Harbour, okay, I'm going to take your daughters now. And he just allows it to happen. But he does it, like a good soldier, like a good boy. And how one of the soldiers tries to go for Florence Pugh's character and Black Widow, potentially Mia Jovovich's daughter, I don't know yet. Black Widow, young kid Black Widow, just disarms the guy, takes his gun, and starts aiming it at everyone. And Dreykov immediately notices this one has fire. And that's like, oh, it's cool to have lines like that. This is about building up who the character actually is. Now, I'm a normie when it comes to this stuff. I didn't read the comics. This is not. I can't speak to that. So, no disrespect intended to true comic book fans who probably know, like, no, they ruined this even here. I'm sorry. I didn't know. But what a shocking way for the whole thing to go. Because it's so misleading where you actually kind of believe maybe are these their kids? Were they deep undercover for that long? Only to find out, oh no, this is the way this system operates, is they specifically take discarded children off the street and turn them into these assassins. And it's such a creepy, sad, messed up title sequence where we actually see the daughters get taken and thrown in, and the next time we see them, they're still that same age, but they are coming out of a shipping container on one of those, the large barge ships that ships your products across seas. They're coming out of a shipping container like Peter Petrelli, and then they're all lined, and it's all these girls lined up, and Dreykov is just picking the ones he thinks are right. And there's such a creepy, the human trafficking, sex trafficking, there's all these vibes that come off of this sequence that are so disturbing and uncomfortable. But I just appreciated the movie for going there, because I'm like, this is stuff that's happening right now. This is, you want to talk about a relevant, current, terrifying issue that's not talked about enough. That's the horrible things we don't know that go on in this country and every country. It's happening right now, but it's being played under the context of this assassin James Bond, Jason Bourne type of styled movie. So even though it's the opening of the movie, it's very intense, and it is, I want to watch this movie. It's wonderful that Marvel was willing to allow this much. That takes some real cojones or cojones. I don't know what you're supposed to do when it's a female director, but dang, I really appreciate the boldness to go that dark for a Marvel, what is now a staple Marvel movie. Marvel's always teetering the line with Disney, and I'm just like, you need to go more Marvel, fuck it, just go more Marvel, teetering that line. But to have that really haunting title sequence, and then that even the title sequence is a part of the storytelling, which is how these girls what they experience. So that's what I enjoy. We're not just banging through scenes. We're getting the life experience of these people for the first 10 minutes of the movie, and it's seems to start off warm and comforting, and then quickly descends into tragedy. And again, knowing what happens to her character later anyway, it's I think it does it actually I think sucks more away from this movie as opposed to taking anything away from the other movies. But I just appreciate going there because essentially after this opening, I don't have that much more to say. It's just blast on action. It's just tons of great action. But I just really, from a cinema loving point of view, I would say I appreciate a movie just telling a straightforward story. And although I liked Captain Marvel, that was a very experimental movie. I appreciate the scale and scope of it much more now, and the boldness of those ideas. But I think this one up front, I'm like, okay, this director's clearly going to make the next Oscar-winning spy thriller. She's going to make the next Mission Impossible that blows people's mind. I know it. But for the damn need to please the Marvel crowd, the movie stays so straightforward. But I love the little James Bond flips, like the GoldenEye references. Just the fact that, again, Moonraker is my favorite James Bond movie. It's not everybody's favorite. I know there's a whole thing against it for some people, but for me, I'm like, no, that's all me. I love that. One of my favorite moments of Moonraker, which I think kind of is what is part of this opening of the movie. In Moonraker, there's a haunting killing scene of a young woman where Drax is angry at a young woman that Bond seduces and basically uses her to get info and access to his facility. Drax, being aware that Bond could only have gotten his access and information from her, takes her out to the edge of a park where no one is around, and then sixes dogs on her, but gives her a minute to run and get as far away from them as she can. And this is the only Bond death scene, or villain murdering another character scene, where I've ever genuinely felt fear and emotion, because it just starts off with her running and the music isn't quite that dramatic yet. And then when she realizes that the dogs are coming for her, the music just stays dramatic. It doesn't become more fun. It does, it just becomes very intense, and it feels like a genuine movie scene, sort of like a crime movie or something like that, or a horror movie. Just the way the emotions build, and then even though you don't see her killed, you see just enough to know that that's what happens. And that's what I like about the beginning of this movie, is that even though you don't really see what happens to these girls, it's so shocking and haunting. And especially like the girl from Moonraker, she's so innocent. She's so innocent, and really Bond got the information out of her because he was just clever enough to read around the things she was saying, and it was just really just watching what she was doing. But she herself wasn't trying to betray her boss. She was just bamboozled. And those girls at the beginning of this movie, they're just, one of them's innocent, and that's the Florence Pugh character. She has no clue that this is a spy situation. So for her, it's like this is the moment of the innocence being destroyed, but rather than being killed necessarily, the innocence is destroyed within her, and it's crushing. And what I love about her character is that she does vocalize her pain, but it's again not in a full storytelling speech. There's a scene where, mega spoiler, they rescue Red Guardian from prison, which is the incredible sequence with them in the white suits. They rescue him, and then they're on a helicopter, and he's talking about, wouldn't you like to have kids someday? And Florence Pugh describes in graphic detail what what Black Widow had already said in Avengers: Age of Ultron, which is she can't have kids. But the way Florence Pugh's character says it is that, well, they cut all of those reproductive parts out of our bodies. Just snip, snippy, snippy. And she goes into such disgusting, scary detail. Even Red Guardian, who's happy to beat people up and do all kinds of violent stuff, just goes, oh, no, 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 I don't want to hear that. But that's, to me, that what great character writing, that you can just, that have such a clear character with such a clear point of view and such a distinct traits. And I think the worst part about this movie is the antidote. There's this whole antidote plot line. It's such a easy thing. It's such an easy superhero way out of the situation. Very comic booky in general, but not really that interesting for a movie. That kind of stuff. I think it's the dark side of the Loki pokey stick, as Kevin Smith would call it. The staff that Loki carries in the first Avengers movie that he uses to mind control people, which we later learn is an Infinity Stone as well. But to me, I mean, that movie barely makes that kind of silly, cheesy science fiction thing work, just because of certain gags, like when it doesn't work on Iron Man because he essentially touches a piece of metal. But it doesn't make a difference when the Hulk just smashes him around and you can't use it against the Hulk anyway. So stuff like that, I'm just like, okay, that you use it for specific reasons, and that's fine. It's not the centerpiece of your movie. I hear with Black Widow, I feel like because it's such a plot centerpiece, that the entire plot surrounds this little antidote that can help other newer Black Widows snap out of their Black Widow-ness, that essentially they're mind control victims. So, and it's interesting because that in this sense, this is another version of the Winter Soldier program that the Russians were making themselves. So they were doing all kinds of crazy experiments, and it's just a whole other world of some madness that we have yet to discover. But I thought that, that was really unnecessary, and it takes away the challenge. But going with the whole James Bond thing, you're just trying to get through the movie and get them to have an accomplishable goal. And so I understand all of that, but I do appreciate, I appreciate the James Bond gags. There's a point where Taskmaster is just driving this big, massive tank-looking vehicle randomly out of nowhere. No build up to that. He just starts busting through things, busting through vehicles, driving through walls, whatever, trying to catch Black Widow and Florence Pugh. And that is 100% a reference to GoldenEye with Pierce Brosnan. But it's a flip. There's a few James Bond flips in this movie, and I'm just going to talk about the ones I noticed. I liked that, right there in GoldenEye, it's Pierce Brosnan driving a tank, chasing down the bad guy who's in a little blue car going, oh my god, what the hell? And so in this movie, it's a flip where, the villain is driving the tank, more like Terminator 2, and the heroes are in the car going, oh my god, okay, here we go. So that kind of stuff is fun. I'm like, okay, for me who knows what they're doing, I dig it. And then frickin', again, when we get to the reveal of Dreykov's own floating, not a helicarrier, but the same kind of concept. And it's literally sitting in the clouds. It looks very strange. Joss Whedon, on the commentary for the first Avengers movie, talks about the reason he made the helicarrier have invisible panels, because in the comics it didn't have that, I guess. He made the helicarrier have invisible panels because after many, many attempts to make it work, the original concept for the helicarrier was that it was hiding in, clouds that it created itself so that the world couldn't see it. But it really just looked like it was floating on clouds. It looked awkward. It looked like it didn't make any sense. So, hence making the invisible panels just to justify how this thing would be able to just go anywhere and not be noticed. So, in this case, they decide to not do the invisible panels. And I think you see very clearly why invisible panels are so important, because it does look like it's just randomly sitting in the clouds. Very odd. Very interesting choice. But the design of that thing, straight up Drax's space station. Not complete, but very similar shapes. If you were to look at both scenes next to each other, you'd go, aha, I know what you do. And even the finale, like, okay, mega spoilers here, but it's not really. It's an action scene, fuck. Endgame's the actual finale, so I'm not spoiling anything. She has to live in order to be in Infinity War, so I'm not spoiling anything. We're not really. But major spoilers for this movie. So the ending, when they blow that sucker up, and it's a scene of, Scarlett Johansson falling through the sky after Florence Pugh, and Scarlett Johansson's carrying the parachute pack with her. And then we have the trailer shot of Taskmaster doing the same thing. This is a flip. This same sequence happens at the beginning of Moonraker. And that's James Bond falling from a plane after Jaws, it's Jaws who has the last parachute bag. And Bond is trying to get it from Jaws. So they flip it where now Black Widow's trying to get it to Florence Pugh. And frickin' Taskmaster is after both of them. As opposed to Bond randomly versus two henchmen in the air, which it looked a little corny at times. So little stuff like that. That's a very nerdy, you have to have watched that movie reference. But I appreciated it having watched that movie, seeing that Moonraker clip, knowing that that's what they were talking about, knowing that they were speaking to a very specific audience who would know exactly what was going on. Even the beginning with Black Widow misleading General Ross, that is totally Jason Bourne. It's like a Jason Bourne up front, just to sort of acknowledge that was the last new spy thing, but also kind of establishing, well, Black Widow is the new spy thing, potentially. Stuff like that. And I think the Budapest action sequence where they're, going around on motorcycles and hopping around on rooftops, felt like the last couple Mission Impossibles a little bit, but better, much better. I think this director should totally, Kate Shortland should 100% make more spy movies, more spy assassin movies. Make something new if you want. I don't, care. I'm gonna watch it. If you make another action movie, I love action movies, I love sci-fi. You make one of those, I'm gonna watch it, because I thought the action was really well handled, really well shot. The production design, the quality of this movie on the whole was fantastic. So even though I would say on the whole the story is not as strong as it could be, but I understand that this is literally a James Bond love letter. But if all the characters were women, and that's totally cool with me. I'm always down for that type of movie. I love Xena Warrior Princess. That was just the female response to Hercules, but in the same universe. I love stuff like that. So it's kind of cool to see the Mission Impossible Bond, Jason Bourne, but as Black Widow, who we know is all of those things. So yeah, so what a great time. So much for me to nerd about as an action movie fan. Really, I did make a short film, fan film, 007, I Only Need One. I didn't know James Bond before I made that. That was my friend wrote that. He loved James Bond, and so he asked me to help him make it. And so to prepare for making that, I watched as many James Bond movie films as I could. I think I watched all but one or two of the total films that came out. And because I did that homework, I was catching as many of the Bond references as I could. But it's just great to see that this movie took that spirit on. You know, we keep getting the Dick Donner thing over and over and over again. I think Man of Steel was an attempt to flip it on its head, but ultimately did the same thing. And Wonder Woman, and especially Wonder Woman 1984, which is 100% a love letter to Superman 2. It's nice to see a movie that is now we're done referencing other superhero movies, but because this character is an assassin and a spy, it was wonderful to get us referring to that type of universe and just have a different type of experience. So I certainly hope Marvel gets bolder. What I personally want, I would love a movie that was all the beginning of this, and it was still Black Widow. You know, that to me would be a fascinating movie, and you could still cut out parts of the what happens to them as children and you know in their youth, just because that is so heavy and horrific. But you could get around that maybe as a teenager or in the young 20s, seeing her do spy stuff. I would really love to see more Black Widow in that sense. I would love to see more stuff like that, and I think Scarlett Johansson just totally, either if you have to do it with her makeup or CGI, or you have to do the Tobey Maguire thing where you just get a tiny little person and then CGI her face on it. Whatever you want to do, just to make it, you know, to tell that end of the story. To me, I think let's just go full origin. But what I also wanted, what I felt this movie was missing, the relationship with Hawkeye, I think was very important. I think if we had reduced the action a little bit, and we could have even cut back on some of the family bickering stuff where they're trying to confront the issue that they were a fake family, and you know, because that was a huge chunk of this movie, and I do think it was handled well enough, but I think we could have cut down on a couple action scenes and cut down a little bit of that, and it would have been nice to just have one or two scenes with Hawkeye where we see Black Widow as bad as she used to be and actually see her own reflection of her personal life and how she interacted with Hawkeye, and see the Budapest stuff and see why she believes Dreykov is dead, and really have a genuine Mission Impossible 1 build up to that twist of him not being dead. They should have story wise gone more for what Mission Impossible did. I'm eventually going to do a little Why It's Great sort of mini season about action movies, and I'm going to talk about Mission Impossible, and the story elements that I'm kind of semi referring to now are going to be way fleshed out in that video, so you can kind of know what I'm talking about. Right now, I'm just like, wait, what? What do you mean story elements for that? But I feel like that movie has a main character who dies in the beginning, who becomes alive at the end and is revealed to be, spoiler alert, the villain. I really feel that they should have gone that way with the Dreykov character, not so much the Drax. I think Drax is fine as a reference for where this story is going plot-wise. But I think, in all honesty, Mission Impossible should have been more the direction they went in, where she has the conflicting relationship of this being an abusive person that has controlled her whole life, and also at the same time, you know, is he dead? Playing that up much more, giving that a little more weight, but also how important it is to her that she thought he was dead, and the relationship with Hawkeye, what Hawkeye has with Scarlet Witch. We should have seen the origin of that. Maybe this is the first time he didn't kill someone he should have, and he he could have his own little arc of, whoa, that was justified. She totally swung back to the good side. I feel like in this case, it didn't feel like there was any kind of worry of, you know, social issues. Should she be dealing with a man or whatever? I think it would have been a really great. I think they handled this so straight and in such an honest way. I do feel like they were just trying to tell the best movie they could. But I do think it would have strongly benefited the movie to have Hawkeye as sort of the brother mirror to what is going on with Florence Pugh. Like, on the one hand, Black Widow had, for a brief moment, had an older brother in Hawkeye who kind of set her straight. And now with Florence Pugh, she should be the one setting her straight. I would have much preferred, rather than the antidote plot line, just that. We could have just focused on that. The other Black Widows could have stayed Black Widows. But if Florence Pugh's character had risen to some level of success, and it was maybe a leader compared to what Black Widow was before she turned into an Avenger, I think that would have been more interesting to sort of see the more Moses versus the Pharaoh type of relationship of, like, we were family. We were a part of the same team, and now you're playing for the other team, and it's trying to break the other person's stubbornness. I think that would have made a much stronger spy movie, a much stronger storyline. I was much more interested in sort of the genuine origin of this character. I think that would have made a stronger film. But that being said, I don't think the film doesn't deliver. I think it 100% delivers on the Marvel Cinematic Universe promise. I only think the end credits scene is a drag. As much as I would have loved all the crap I just talked about, I would have also not minded if they did the end credit scene totally different. I think the end credit scene feels like a Disney Plus scene. It feels like they shot it for Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It doesn't feel at all like it belongs with what they do with it. Again, I'm trying not to spoil it too much, even though this is a spoiler section. But yeah, so that's basically how I felt. I really love the action movie references. I think this director has the stuff to make really great action films and really great spy thrillers and serious dramas. Fantastic job. Kate Shortland, I hope I'm saying that right. I hope I didn't just totally forget your name. And the cast and crew, and I swear to God, it was really nice seeing Rachel Weisz again. Seeing Rachel, I mean, I know she's been doing movies, but it's cool seeing her in an action movie again. My introduction to her was The Mummy, which came out in the 90s with Brendan Fraser. And I remember being so captured by how beautiful she was. And, how many, young kids must have felt that way watching Scarlett Johansson for the first time, because that, was what these little 10-year-olds must be seeing. And kind of just like this sort of generational, even with her character in The Mummy, in the first Mummy, she's an innocent. And in the second Mummy, she's suddenly a badass action warrior. And it's freaking awesome. I mean, I didn't have a problem with that part of the movie. There's another part of the movie that I felt was a little bit not right. But I'm not going to get into that. This is not a Mummy video. But I was like, so cool. And the beginning of me seeing her as characters with mascara on that are kind of deadly and interesting. And then to see her suddenly appear with mascara and being an action hero again in Black Widow is like, oh, cool. I get to see it with you as you are now, which is like, oh, you could still kick ass. You still got the stuff, Rachel Weisz. So it's cool to watch it on that level. But yeah, anyway, that was my thoughts. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, sure, could have been better. I would have liked certain things in the story. But I just appreciate how well it was made and the boldness of the beginning. I think we need more of that, and I certainly hope that Marvel gets to a point where they can do these mainstream movies and then do a perfected version of what DC's starting with, this whole Black Label concept. I would love some more R-rated, juicy stuff that Marvel produces that maybe is not necessarily for the little kids, but adults can specifically enjoy. And shouldn't, I think the Marvel brands should always maintain a certain level of respect. I think Silence of the Lambs is as dark and brutal as it should ever get, and maybe too much. But if you were to take Silence of the Lambs down a couple notches, I think you could find a healthy place for Marvel to live, to tackle more complicated dark issues and really create some genuine art. Because I think the beginning of this movie is very artistic and does represent the goal of cinema. So on that level, I really respect the movie and really respect the direction and the writing and the casting, every aspect. The fact that you can have producers that are out there letting filmmakers and film directors go this far as they let them. Say, and if there's deleted scenes that feature the stuff I was asking for, but it didn't work, then thanks for not including them because they didn't work. But damn, in that scene, the Budapest scene where they first go to that little house and they refer to the holes on the wall, and Florence Pugh is like, what kind of bullet makes that hole? And Scarlett Johansson goes, "Oh, that's an arrow." I'm like, "Oh, see, you gotta show that flashback. Don't do that." But who knows? Maybe we'll get a Black Widow 2, and that's what that'll be about. It'll be about that would be wonderful. Just juicy ideas. Do a Black Widow 2 and do that. Just do that, please, because I'm telling you right now, I think people would eat it out. I think people would eat it up. It would be fantastic. So anyway, thank you for watching. Check that out. It's freaking awesome. Really great time. Totally love the James Bond throwback type of movie. It's a lot of movies do a lot of action, but I think this has a lot of emotion in it, and wonderful to see Scarlett Johansson whooping ass, and finally getting to be the character in full. And I hope we get more. Please give us some more. So thank you for watching. Remember, don't like, don't subscribe, and don't comment. And I'll catch you next time.